Right.
Good evening, everyone.
Kabbalah Tov, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay. So we're continuing the Bet Yosef here. So we got to read the Torah a little bit. It says the Torah, Shnei Achsenaim she'en makirin ze et ze. Yeah, so this is like one of the laws of meat and milk, that if you have two guests and they don't know each other, they're like strangers, but they happen to be eating in the same place, it's a cafeteria or something, whatever it is. So let me just read inside the Torah here exactly what he says. Right, so he says, so the rule is, that they cannot eat meat and milk in the same table unless they make some kind of a marker, right, to display that they're eating meat and milk. So he gives you an example. How do you do this? Versus, let's say you put there a some kind of a pitcher, vessel in between you and your friend there, the other guy. So this way you remember that you're not supposed to have meat and milk because he's eating meat, you're eating milk, right? And we don't want you to be sharing that's the idea. Or another solution is that each one will eat on his own tablecloth, So this way, it also, right, has a sign that you shouldn't be intermingling the foods together, because one is dairy and one is meat. So this is also brought down this halacha in Yoredea, where we have the laws of meat and milk. This is just incidental over here, because of the issue of we're going through the meal process. But the truth is, the main place for this is in Yoredea. Okay, so that's the end of the tour. So let's go to Bet Yosef and see what he says about that. So he says, right, that it comes from the Gemara, Mishnah and Gemara. Where is this? In Perek Kol Havasar. Where is that? In Chulin, Kuf Zayin Amud Bet. Right, that's where we find the laws of meat and milk over there. So then he moves on. או שני אחים אפילו מקפידים זה על זה אסורים. So yeah, he brings another piece here in the tour. So maybe I skipped something here in the tour. I'll read it one more time just to make sure I got everything. So again, right, one more time. It says like this: if you have two guests who don't know each other, right? אוכלים על השולחן אחד זה בשר ואחד זה גבינה ואין חוששים. So right, I wasn't right. I didn't state it properly, right? I have to restate this again. Make sure we understand the details over here. We have two scenarios here, right? One is that you have two guests who don't know each other. So in that case, they don't need any recognition. They don't need any sign not to eat with each other, eat each other's foods. One is eating dairy, one is eating meat. Why is that? Since they don't know each other, obviously, right, they won't be sharing, their meals. So there's no concern about that. That's the reason why. That's when they don't know each other, right? Who shares with somebody that you don't know, right? Nobody does that. So, that's why we're not concerned. But on the other hand, but if they know each other, or two brothers, even though they're particular with each other, so they're the ones who have to make the recognition, right? The sign, because they, may share, because they're friendly, or they're, they're brothers, whatever. So, brothers will share, friends will share, but strangers will not share one with the other. That's not the way it goes, right? So therefore, when it comes to strangers, you don't need any sign for that. Okay, now we got it more straight, right? Maybe I skipped something last time. So this time, right, make sure we got everything. Okay, so now let's go back to Bet Yosef and see how he dissects this. Hmm. Yeah. So it says, yeah. So he just brings the sources, but he says, Sham Baya Deipshita Umashma Li Deachim Lav Davka. So he says, right, Bet Yosef, that it's not only talking about brothers, Elahu Adin Leachsenaim Makrim Zeze. It's also, people who know each other, right, recognize each other. They may share, you never know. They know each other. Right? וכן נראה שהוא דעת רבנו שכתב, he said that's the way the Tur also understands it, because he wrote in your day in Tur, Siman Peichet, chapter 88, והשי אסור להעלותו על השולחן. So he says that which we say, right, that you're not allowed to put on the same table, right, two people, dairy and meat, dishes, דווקא בשני בני אדם המכירים זה את זה. That's only if they know each other, as we said, right? ואז אסור אפילו במקפידים זה על זה. So then it's forbidden, even if they're makpid. What does that mean, makpid? In other words, they're not really eating together like, like one shared meal. It's not like that. Each one has his own food. But nevertheless, when it comes to people who know each other, they may come to share. You never know, right? This one may say, "Oh, try this, try that. I'll take a little bit of yours, you take a little bit of mine, right? Then we'll be all good." Yeah, people do that, right? So that's why we need to have a sign, that they should not share, because after all, right, one is eating meat and one is eating dairy. That's the idea. So then we're talking about, right, making that sign, as we said. שם ולא אסור אלא בתפיסה אחת סל כדתך אלא בכאין תפיסה אחת פירשו התוספות והראש שאם יש דבר מפסיק בינתיים לא הווה כאין תפיסה אחת. Right, so he says that if you have something that they put in between, right, that separates them, no problem. כי ההיא דפרק רבי ישמעאל גבי מרקוליס שאמר כאן בתפיסה אחת כאן בשתי תפיסות, איך ידמה, שתי תפיסות כגון דאיקה גובה ביני וביני. So there has to be some kind of a recognition there, right? As we said, whether it's there's something in between, placed in between them, or different tablecloths, or one, let's say, right, another example would be one is eating with a tablecloth and the other one is eating on the bare table. That's also right, recognizable, good recognition. Anything like that, which makes it apparent that they cannot share. Right, anything like that, right, can do the job, whatever it may be. ולכך הם נוהגים עכשיו שניים שאוכלים על השולחן, אחד זה בשר וזה גבינה, שמניחים לכם או קנקן. So he says, therefore, what they do is, he says the custom is they place something in between them, to make it known, right, that they cannot share. Uh, so what do they place? So he says like a loaf of bread, right, or a pitcher, something like that. לעשות מחיצה ביניהם, it's making like a partition between them. לקרא, for recognition purposes. או אוכל על מפה אחרת דהווה כן שתי תפיסות, ויש מפרשים בתפיסה אחת שהם בהוצאת אחד, כמו אחים שקנו אתרוג בתפוסת הבית בפרק יש ומחלין, ופרק תפיסה אחת, שק דתך, מה לי הוצאה אחת, מה לי שתי הוצאות, אם מכירים זה את זה, משנה כן תפיסה אחת, דהיינו שמכירים זה את זה, לפירוש זה, לא מצינו שהם מתרים על שולחן אחד, מחמת ההפסק שיש ביניהם. So, yeah, that's the bottom line, right? As we said, pretty much. Okay, so והריף לא הזכיר had כאין תפיסה אחד, בדיני שהוא היה מפרש כפירוש אחרון שכתבו התוספות בראש, וכן יראה שהם דת הרמב"ם, והעולם נוהגים כדברי הפירוש הראשון, שאכול זה בשר וזה גבינה, על ידי הפסק שביניהם, או על ידי שכל אחד אוכל בפסח במפה אחרת. So he says that's a custom, right, as we mentioned, right? And he's bringing you here several things there, but that's the bottom line. כתב דראשון נראה עיקר, וכן עמם הדבר. רבנו אף על פי שכתב שני פירושים בטור יודע, כאן לא כתב אלא פירוש אחד. So he says the Tur only here wrote one opinion basically, right? One option here, one commentary. בלבד, וגם מתוך דבריו שם נראה שפירוש זה עיקר, שהפירוש האחר כתבו בלשון, ויש אומרים, משמע דפסיר ללשון ראשון עיקר, וכן פסק הרשב"א בתורת הבית. So basically, right, he's telling you that all of them seem to agree here, that's the main way of understanding this sugya, this case here. Okay, וזה לשון השני אנשים מקנים את זה שעשו אם היו עושים הקל ביניהם, כגון שהיה אוכל זה במפה וזה במפה, חלק בקצב בזה, מותר, שאין אינו חוששים, אלא שמא ישכחו ויתערבו זה עם זה, ויקרא זה מודיען לפיכך מותר. So the same thing, right? Again, it's reiterating the same thing again. Right, that you need something to, place something in between them to be like a recognition, to be a partition, whatever you want to call it. כתבו הגאות אשר יפר כל הבשר, עד האוכלים זה בשר וזה גבינה על ידי הפסק לחם, כגון שאינם אוכלים מזה לחם, כגון שיש להם לחם אחר. Right, so he brings here something important to understand, which is that item that you place as a partition between the two people who are eating has to be something that they're not using, for this meal. Because if it is, then it's not really it's not a good sign, really. It's not a good recognition. Because that should be on the table, to eat from it. So you don't really notice it, right, as something new, something different, so that's not going to help you much. So therefore he says, right, it has to be something which they're not using. And then they'll remember that it's coming here just to, right, to be a sign, to be a partition. What would be an example of that? Let's say, they bought a bottle of cola, right? Whatever, right? So, we call it, but if they're using that bottle to drink from also, they're drinking that bottle, so then that doesn't really, you don't feel anything like that, anything different, anything significant, you don't feel. Because it's, you're drinking from it. So it would have to be something that you're not using. Also the same thing, like a loaf of bread. If you're eating from that loaf, So that's not really, teaching you anything there. It's not reminding you of anything. So that's not really going to do the job. So it has to be a loaf of bread that you're not eating from. So then people will remember, why is this here? Oh, yeah, we can't share. Yeah. That's the idea.
But there are people who won't put mixed things on the table together. Like I was hearing from some Ashkenazim that like they'll change tablecloths in between.
You mean two people are eating.
Right. Well, if they're
Each one is eating this and one is eating that.
if they're going to have this and that, they're going to have dairy first and then milk or then meat. They would after the dairy they would change the tablecloth. They won't have the same things on the table at the same time or the different things at the same time.
But are you talking about they're both eating the same thing or each one is eating separately?
I guess the question with
It's not the same thing, you
it's
understand what
not
I'm saying, right? Yeah.
okay. So like if one was eating milk and then after they were done eating their milk, they would change the tablecloth so that the other one could eat the meat.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Well, they have to learn some halakha. They're a little bit ignorant. That's pretty much what it is. Okay. Don't attribute that to being Ashkenazi. It's just ignorance. That's what it is. Okay. Anyway, so we'll go on. A lot of people say, you're all this Ashkenazi, this is Sephardi. No, it's not. It's just ignorance. They don't know the halakha. Okay. So, yeah, I can tell you. It is what it is. אוקיי, so ונראה דהו הדין לקנקן שמפסיקים בו שצריך שלא ישתו ממנו, right? So he says the same thing also would apply, right? With a pitcher, as we said, right? If you're drinking from it, it's not going to help you much, right? It's not any recognition there. I'll tell you guys a funny story, called true story. One time, I was in Yerushalayim in my kollel there, right? And there's like a cafeteria there, like a kitchen that we used to eat there. So we would go in there and eat. And sometimes, it would happen once in a while, that this one is eating dairy, this one is eating meat. It happens, right? Each one has his own lunchbox, right? His own thing there, right? Whatever. So, what do you call it? So one time, what I did was I took off my watch, and I put it on the table to be like a partition. My watch became the partition. Okay? So, we're not eating the watch, right? So it's okay. It's not a problem. But anyway, what happened was that, I turned around and my watch is gone.
Maybe somebody did eat it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. So anyway, my watch is gone, like we're here talking about a room of rabbis, like nobody steals over here, you know what I mean? So like you wonder what's going on, like these rabbis don't steal, you know what I mean? They're totally honest, these guys. I mean, they couldn't hurt a fly, these guys. So anyway, right, guess what? Then I noticed, there was some guy who was working in the yeshiva, and he happened to be cleaning the tables, right, as we were eating, and guess which community he came from. I guess you can guess that, being that we were in Israel, right? I won't say anymore. Okay. So then I said to myself, "Oh my God, these guys are famous for this, they have very quick hands, these guys. You know what I'm talking about?" So I said to myself, "This guy stole my watch. Like, what do I do? I didn't even see it. I wasn't paying attention. So you know what I did? I screamed out. He says, I said, my watch was stolen. He says, if I don't get it back, I told him, straight in his face. If you don't give it back to me, he says, I'm gonna go and not tell on you. I'm gonna go to the office and tell people that you're a thief. So guess what? In like 10 seconds, the watch reappears all of a sudden, right on the table. Okay. All right, there you go, right? So you get the point, right? So that's what you got to watch out. If you go to Israel, you got to watch out from those guys, because they have very quick hands, those guys. Okay. I won't say anymore. Okay, true story. Anyway, let's go back to our discussion. So anyway, right, ונראה דהוא הדין לקנקן שמפסיקים וצריך שלא ישתו ממנו, ומי הוא יש לחולק ולומר דווקא בלחם שכן דרך להניחו על השולחן לקעקע או אחרי מיני, אבל קנקן או אין דרכן להניחו על השולחן והניחו עכשיו להפסיק אף על פי ששותים ממנו מנקרא מילתא שפיר הווה הפסק. So this is interesting, right? What this rabbi says here. Who's this rabbi, by the way? I just want to see, make sure I got this straight. Right. We have the Rashba here, and then what? We had the Hagaot Asheri. Okay, right. And then it's a Bet Yosef. So what does a Bet Yosef say here? Again, let's make sure we got it straight. דהו הדין קנקן שמפסיקים בו שצריך שלא ישתו ממנו, מי הוא? יש לחלק ולומר דווקא בלחם שכן דרך הניחו על השולחן דקה לחקירה. Oh, right. I see. Okay. Yeah, so he makes a good point over here. Let's say you have, so as we said, right, if you're eating from that item, then it's not really going to help you much because it's supposed to be on there on the table. So nobody's going to feel anything. But there are certain things, which you can put on the table and you are using it, for your meal, but still it can do the job. That's what the Bet Yosef says, right? When is that? So he says, for instance, let's say, you put like those, like a canister, like those small barrels, on the table, right? So those things usually, don't go on the table. They're too large. I mean, you don't serve on the table from that. It's not like a pitcher or some kind of bottle, too large to be there. So therefore, right, he's telling you about Yosef that even though you're taking from there, you're drinking from there, but the fact that it's too large to be on the table, that's already a good sign. So therefore, that you can use. Good point. Okay, nice. So that's nice. Let's move on. כתבו תוספות, says the name of תוספות, בפרק כל הבשר, also there from the חולין, right? ואם תאמר מהם אמצעים כגון בין גבינה לבשר, שהם לצורך מצווה, יהיו טעונים ברכה. So it says, so you may think, right? We already spoke about this a little bit. We mentioned it before. Do these waters, right, that we wash in the middle of the meal, do they require a blessing or not, right? So we said, right, there were some who said that it does require, but then we mentioned, right, that the custom is not to do that. But Tosfot seems to say, right, like this. He says, you may think that you need to bless on that. You may think. But he says, no, not really. So he says, this is basically just, proper manners. That's all it is, like hygiene, whatever you want to call it. So therefore, there's no need to make a blessing on these things. So, but the truth is, what I just said was not really, making the point so well. It's more than that. It's more than what I just said. What he's saying over here is like this, let's say, for instance, you're going from cheese right to meat. So we said yesterday, right, that's okay. You can do that. There's no problem with that. But right, the thing is that it's kind of like, now this washing that you're doing is really necessary, kind of, because, you don't want to have the cheese on your hands, right, when you're eating the meat. So it's sort of necessary, you know? So that's what it's saying. Because it's sort of necessary, you may think that you have to make a blessing on that. But he says not really, right? His answer is no. It is not necessary. In other words, it is necessary, in terms of the physical aspect of it, that you have stuff on your hands. But he says it's not really, uh, it's not really something that the rabbi is obligated to bless on. This kind of thing, so therefore, that's why there's no blessing on this. So bottom line is right that this chapter is on Maim Emtzaim, right? The middle waters, right? Whatever. A strange kind of name, in English comes out strange. Middle waters, whatever. But anyway, right? The bottom line is we don't bless on the middle waters. So do we bless on Maim Achronim, the last washing? Do we bless on that?
You mean like benching?
Yeah, before you bench, right? Do we bench? Do we bless on that washing that we do?
You mean the Ma'am Achronim?
Right. Do we bless on that?
No.
No, we don't, right? So the only thing that the custom is the only thing we bless on is in the beginning, right? Before we eat. But the middle and the last water, right? The Ma'im Achronim, we don't bless on that. This is the way we do it today, right? Pretty straightforward. Okay, very good. So let's move on a little bit. So he says, "V'Rashba katav b'Torah habayit ta'am acher lefi she'en mitzvah kvu'a שאילו ביום אוכל אפילו בלא רחיצה כשרואה שאין בידיו לכלוכי גבינה." So the Rashba gives a different reason why we don't bless. He says because it's not really something that we do all the time, this kind of thing. So what does that mean? If you don't have any cheese, right, remnants of cheese on your hands, you wouldn't really have to wash, as we said, right? We said that yesterday. So he says, therefore, that's why there's no blessing on it, because it's not constant. It's not a constant. As opposed to, when you're washing your hands right before the meal, that's a constant, right? We always wash. Right? There's no exceptions to that rule. Okay, good. All right, so it goes Tashlum dinim elo itvaru b'siman pete. Right. So it says right that the truth is, this is not the main place for these halachot. Right. So where are they? And you're there, right? Peitet, which is 89. Over there, that the laws of meat and milk. That's where we get into this whole thing, more comprehensively there. This is just a little bit of a rundown, right? A little bit of a, So that's it. Okay, beautiful. So we're done with this chapter, but we got to do Shulchan Aruch. So he says like this, right? Whatever the custom is regarding Maim Achronim is also the same with Emtzaim, right? The middle waters. Same rule, basically, right? Ben Lakil, Ben Lachmir, whether it's stringent or lenient, right? It's all the same. Chutz mehesech dat, except a couple of things, right? What does hesech dat means? Like getting distracted. Sheposel be'emtzaim, right? So when it comes to middle waters, that is a problem. Why is that? Since he wants to eat more, right after he washes, so he has to guard his hands, so therefore he needs to concentrate on that. Needs some concentration. Also, he says there's another difference, which is that that when it comes to the emtzaim, the middle, right, you have to dry your hands, right? But Maim Achronim, apparently you don't have to dry your hands. right? So why do you have to dry your hands with the middle? Well, since you're eating, it's not proper manners, to eat with wet hands. As we said, right, when we talked about the beginning of the meal, we talked about that, right? That you should dry your hands. So here also the same thing, you should dry your hands because, you know, it's not proper manners to eat like that. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says about that. I'm curious to see. Exactly what I told you, right? He took the words right out of my mouth. Okay, say no more. Let's move on. Okay, so what else we got here? So the Rama brings in another thing, which could be different. So he says, some say that also when it comes to the middle, you need water there, right? In other words, you can't use any other liquid, right? Any other, or some kind of drink, When it comes to Mayim Achorim, you can use like other drinks as well. For instance, you can do like with soda pop, you can do it, or some other kind of soft drink, whatever it is, right? All kinds of stuff like that. You can use that for Mayim Achorim. Who would want to do that, right? But it's only when you don't have water, right? Obviously, right? Why would you want? Why would you want to do that? Kind of ridiculous. Okay, let's see Mishnah Berurah on that also, right? This is interesting, right? Why is that? Why is that differentiation like that? So let's see what he has to say. So says Mishnah Berurah, you don't want to use any other liquids, right? When it comes to the middle. Why is that? Because since the whole point is to clean your hands from the grime on your hands, right? From the eating, so that's not going to do the job. מה שאינו כן באחרונים, שאינם באים רק להעביר על זוהמה מידיים, אפילו משכין מעבירים זוהמה. So he says, but when it comes to the final waters, right, מים אחרונים, so he says there, it's really, just to get the, like, the truth is, it's really hard to differentiate between them, but he's using the word zohama, right? So zohama means like filth. So the question is, what's the difference between filth and fat, grime? I'm not really sure what he means by that. Because the mutar bashar mashkin, אבל כמו האחרונים הסכימו לרמה. שם משקים מתוכן, שמונים, להקים את השונות. Yeah, so in other words, he wants to say like this, right? Let's be more precise in order to get the idea. He's saying that the middle water is like it's just coming to remove the fat on your hands, the grease. As opposed to the latter, right? The later, what are Mayim Achronim, which is coming really to remove the grime. I don't know, something like that. So, in other words, removing grease is like more of a tall order. So you need like real water. Not any other drinks. Okay, interesting. Um, but then also he brings right another opinion, which is the Maharshal, and the Maharshal seems to say that it doesn't really matter, meaning to say that it's the same for both. You can use other things that are other than water, other drinks, other liquids. Right? Which kind of makes sense, because differentiating between grime and grease, I'm not really sure if that holds up so well. Anyway, we'll leave that as it is, whatever. It's a little bit sharp, that differentiation. Okay. So this is going on the Ramah, right? This whole thing. Uh, but the Shulchan Aruch really didn't mention this issue. So apparently, right, he probably holds like the Maharshal, that there is no difference regarding that. Okay, very good. So this is quite this whole chapter, it's, um, it's like underrated kind of a chapter. A lot of people don't know about these things, these details. Uh, and I guess what the reason is that we're not this is not a very popular chapter in our times. The reason is because we're eating with forks and spoons, so we're not really coming into contact with the food with our hands so much. And this is the reason why, it's not really so relevant for us, this whole thing. Obviously, right? So, the typical Shabbat meal, right, in a Jewish family, everything they're eating with forks, whether it's the fish or the meat or whatever, right? So, when you don't have to wash your hands, during the meal. And nobody does that, by the way. You ever see somebody, washing their hands in the middle of the meal? Unless, the hands got dirty, right? Grimy, as we said, right? Grimy. Okay, if your hands are grimy, of course, you got to wash, but otherwise, if you're just eating with a fork or a spoon, so it's not really, you don't need it. Just use a napkin, and that's good. That'll get you through the meal. So that's why, this chapter is really underrated. It's not really, it's not one of the big topics, of our time. Okay. Okay, very good. So I guess we can go to the next chapter, which is Kuf Ein Daled. Let me just make sure we're done with this. Yeah, we're done. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is an interesting one. We're talking now about having wine during the meal. What happens over there? So says the Tur, Yain shebetoch haseuda mivarchin alav borei pir gifen, right? So this is one of the things, right, which are like an exception to the rule, which is that when you bring wine, right, to drink during the meal, we bless on it, right, borei pir gifen, and but for other things, we don't bless on during the meal. I remember one time, I was at a certain, whatever, some kind of function, whatever, some kind of dinner, and somebody comes to me and he says, Rabbi, this was in Israel, do you need to make a blessing on beer, during the meal? So the truth is, that we don't bless on beer during the meal or any other, liquor. We don't bless, shakol, whatever. We only bless on wine. That's it.
But why doesn't the first blessing, the first Brei not count for all the cups of wine? Why do you do another one?
Or you mean during for the kiddush?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you're right. If it was a kiddush, you'll be right. You're absolutely right. We're talking about when. Wait a second. Wait a second. Make sure I'm telling you the right thing here. Yeah. So the thing is, the reason why we do that, you're right. The reason why we do it is because when you're washing your hands, like you're going into it's like an interruption from what you did before, and that's the reason why. But you know what? From my memory, it's like for some reason when you asked me this question, it got a little foggy in my head. But the truth is, if you made the kiddush right before, the meal, right before, and you didn't wait, like you went right after to the meal, you don't need to bless on the wine. So we're here talking more about what? We're talking about when it's a weekday, something like that. Or let's say you made the kiddush way, way before, and then you took a break, and did something else, and then you had the meal afterwards. So then you do have to bless on the wine because it's already too much time elapsed there. You want to do something else, right? Whatever. But if you already made for the kiddush, you don't need during the meal. So here we're talking about a weekday, Okay, good. Sounds right. So that's the way it is, yeah. So here he's talking about a weekday. The thing is, that in those days, right? Another thing which is different from them to us. In those days, the main drink during the meal was wine. Not like today. We have the soft drinks and stuff. In those days, they had no soft drinks, no such a thing like that. That's something new in the world. Relatively. So therefore, the main beverage for the meal was wine. And that's why they have this issue because that's their drink. So then, why is it that we bless for the wine, but we don't bless for other drinks like beer, liquor, whatever? What's the difference? So the difference is that wine is chashuv. It's like very prominent. The most prominent drink in Judaism is wine. So therefore, the rabbis gave it its own blessing, during the meal, which is something unusual, as I said. Usually, you don't have that, because it's very prominent. Why is wine so prominent, by the way? Because first of all, we do like all kinds of mitzvot with it. We do kiddush, right, as you said, and many other things. Havdalah, right, and there's so many things that we do with wine, all kinds of mitzvot. So it has a very prominent status in Judaism. That's why it gets its own blessing. There's also other things, they say the Chazal that wine, gives you simcha, gives you joy, right? It's like a joyous kind of thing. It gives you joy, and also, we use it in the temple as well, for offerings, right? Libations, blah, 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 blah. So, wine is like a big thing in Judaism, it's colossal, right? And that's why, but those other drinks, what's the big deal, Have some Heineken, whatever. What's the big deal with that? Yeah. Just get a beer belly. That's all you get from that. What else do you get? Okay, so so let's see the Bit Yosef, what he says here about that. Klomar velo aminan shepat potato, right? So we don't say, he says that the bread, absolves, right, the wine from the blessing. Mevu'ar beperek kitzad mevachim. So he says, right, that it says it's brought down in this perek right? In Brachot, Mem Amud Amud Bet, שאלו את בן זומא מפני מה אמרו דברים הבאים מחמת הסעודה, בתוך הסעודה אינם טעונים ברכה. Right, so he says, what's the reason why they said, right, the things that come, in the meal, all kinds of, dishes and so forth, so on, side dishes, blah, 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 blah. We don't bless on them during the meal. Why don't we bless on those things, right? Whether it's before or after. Why? Amar because the bread absolves everything, right? So he says, well, then if so, then also the wine should be the same, right? So he says, no, but the wine has its own blessing, right? It has a prominence there, as opposed to the other things. So what is he saying here, right? Another point, which I didn't mention yet, which is that, wine, right, it's so prominent that it has its own blessing, as opposed to any other drink, right? You know of any other drink that it has its own blessing? An exclusive blessing? Like wine? No, there's no such thing like that. No such a thing. So that's the thing, that's why it's another reason why it's so prominent. גרום ברכה לעצמו בכמה מקומות הוא בא מברכים עליו ואף על פי שלא היו צריכים לשתייתו. Right? It says you have to bless on it even though you don't really need it so much. And whatever, just you're drinking it, whatever the reason it may be that you're drinking it, you still have to bless on it, right, during the meal, as we said, right? But as we said, right, if you made kiddush right before the Shabbat meal, you don't need to bless on it, of course. Yeah, you're right, of course, But if you waited, these, lately, what I've been doing is, going to early minyan on Shabbat, like nets, whatever. So what happens is I get home like around, 9 o'clock in the morning, and so I'm not really hungry, to eat that early. So what I do is I make kiddush, because I want to, drink something or, have a snack or something, whatever. I want to, because otherwise you can't drink, you can't have a snack, you can't do nothing, right, without making kiddush. So what I do is, I eat like 2 hours later, So that meal that I'm having 2 hours later is not covered by the kiddush, It's the too much time elapsed there, And also, right, I'm doing some other activities there, right? So therefore, right, that's why I had that in my head, When you asked me this question, I was like, oh, yeah, well, yeah. But the truth is, most people they make the kiddush right before the meal, So then it's a different story, as we said, right? Not the same thing. Okay, very good. So we'll see the Shulchan Aruch, and I guess we'll stop there. Let's see what else we can do here. All right, so very simple Shulchan Aruch, right? Yain shebetoch haseuda mevarech alav borei pri gefen, right? That when you're bringing wine during the meal, you're saying borei pri gefen, ve'en apat potato, right? And the bread does not absolve the wine, right? Okay, very simple, right? No fancy stuff, right? So maybe we can do another one. It's very short, So I'm gonna give you a bonus, Let's do one more. Okay, you deserve it. You deserve it. Okay, so let's try that. Let's try one more. So let's see where this is. Seems to be hidden. Bet seems to be hidden. Maybe there's no Bet Yosef, just tour there. Very possible. We find many of those like that. Those of you that learn with me, you know already about these things. You've lived through it. Ah, here it is. It's all the way in the end of the chapter. Can you imagine? All the way in the end. Uh-huh. So let's see what it says. Let's see what we got here. So, right, as we said, the tour says like this: ואם הביאו להן גם שאר משכין אחר הסעודה על היין, עם היין, right? היין פוטרתם. So you know what he says, right? That if they brought other drinks, during the meal, right? As we said, right? Beer, whatever, right? Liquor, stuff like that, soft drinks, blah, 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 whatever it may be. So he says, right? The wine absolves all of them. So that's the thing, with wine, since it's like more prominent than all the other drinks, so therefore when you bless on the wine, you absolve all the drinks. So this is very important. You have to know that, because if you blessed on wine and then they brought you, some Coca-Cola or some beer, you don't bless on that because you already blessed on the wine. That absolved everything. So keep that in mind, It doesn't really matter whether you're in the meal or not in the meal. If you're like sitting in one place, right? And they brought several drinks after the wine absolves everything. So keep that in mind. Okay, so just like the bread absolves everything with the foods, right? The wine also absolves everything with the drinks. Same thing, right? So it says over here the Beit Yosef, Pek Ketzad Memarchim, right? It's over there in the Brachot. מ"א עמוד ב', אמר רבי חייא פת פותרת כל מיני מאכל ויין פותרת כל מיני משקים. As we said, right? Wine, bread absolves all the foods, and wine absolves all the drinks, right? It's the same. ואף על פי שכתבו תוספות, even though תוספות, תכוון דלת הלכתה כבתה, since the halacha is not like that, it says, "B'mai diamar pat patat," regarding what he said, that bread absolves everything. Hachinami is the same thing. Let hilchata kivate b'mai diamar yain poter. He says also the same thing with the wine. Harosh palig alayu, but the Rosh argues with the Tosfot. Katav de'afal gab de let hilchata kivate b'pat. So it says even though the halacha is not like him regarding the bread, right? Poter b'yain poter. But it says the wine is not like that. It is halach. The halacha is like him. Miha ilchata kivate. V'chen data Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu also says that. Katav Rashba says the Rashba gab behad aminan ve'achi yaina niftere. So says the Rashba, that which we said, he says that the wine absolves the drinks just like the bread absolves the foods, right? So it says we're not talking about the drinks that came for the meal, right? So he makes a good point over here, right? Which is that the drinks that come during the meal, they don't really need a blessing, at all, right? So the wine doesn't need to absolve them because they're already absolved as it is. Good point. So he said that's only talking about when you're just sitting down to drink, having some kind of a cocktail party, So then, right, if you're having all kinds of drinks, the wine will absolve everything. So you just make a blessing on the wine and then drink, and drink your heart out, right? Whatever, right? Wine, liquor, right? Then you have your beer and, have this and that, schnapps, God knows what, right? All kinds of stuff. It'll absolve everything. And by the way, that also includes like soft drinks as well, or even water. It absolves everything.
What about like a dessert drink?
Yeah, like a dessert liquor, right? Yeah, it'll take care of that. No problem.
But the bread does not absolve a dessert food.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. So what happens with the dessert, right? So the truth is that in general, the dessert is not really considered to be a part of the meal. So the dessert needs its own blessing. That's usually the way it is. But that usually applies, to what? To the foods. But when it comes to the drinks, we don't really bless on drinks during the dessert. That we don't do. So I hope that clarifies it for you. So if you're having some kind of dessert liquor, right, whatever, something like that, so the rule is that you're not going to bless on that, right? No matter what, regardless of, whether it's during the meal or after the meal, whatever, right? As long as you didn't say Birkat Hamazon yet. Okay, good. So that's the story there. Yeah, okay. I guess we'll stop here. We'll continue next time. B'ezrat Hashem. I don't want to keep you here all night. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next week, right? On Sunday. Have a great Shabbat. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. And have a great Shabbat. We'll see you, Bezat Hashem, Sunday night. God willing.
Thank you, Kavod Harav.
All the best.
Shabbat shalom.
You too.